My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me now and we will explore these topics and so much more with fascinating guests, authors, and experts who will guide us to Destination Unlimited. Are angels real? Do they appear to us in different forms during difficult times with comfort and ideas for resolution? Do we all have angels with us? My guest this week on Destination Unlimited, Christi Clemons Hoffman, says angels are there for all of us and sometimes manifest in the most unexpected ways. Christi is the host of Real Life Angel Encounters podcast on the mindbodyspirit.fm network. She's also the host of Radiate Wellness Podcast, which is in its 6th year on the Mind Body Spirit FM network and dedicated to bringing thought leaders, authors, practitioners, and inspirational guests to radiate light, wellness, balance, creativity, and much more to an international audience. Christi is a lifelong intuitive, channel, teacher, consultant, and Reiki Master whose passion is connecting people with their spiritual team. Her website is radiatewellnesscommunity.com, and she joins me this week to share her new book, Real Life Angel Encounters. Real people share real stories of miraculous encounters. Please join me in welcoming to Destination Unlimited, Christi Clemons Hoffman. Welcome, Christi.
Thank you, Victor. I'm happy to be here.
Christi, your bio described you as a lifelong intuitive channel and teacher. Please share with us your early path and how these gifts manifested for you.
Yes, that's an excellent question. Well, first of all, let me preface this by saying that we're all born intuitive. We all have this ability to tune in with our senses and our heightened awareness. And some of us just are more developed in that than others right off the bat. I must have been a little bit more heightened in my sensitivities because I was seeing ghosts as a baby. My dad tells the story of when he was a night watchman at this huge WPA era high school here in Kansas City. My mom was an x-ray tech at a local hospital, worked nights. He worked nights, putting himself through college. And he would take me in my playpen and set up and study while he was, there at the school and take me with him on his rounds. Well, apparently one night I stood up in my playpen and I must have been maybe about a year old. And I was waving at somebody in the corner and I said, "Hi, Mr. Man." And my dad swears that he quit the job the next day. But then I would see more and more things as I grew up and I would know things. And so there are 4 of these spiritual gifts that we can all have. One is clairvoyance, which we all know. Then there's clairaudience, clairsentience, and claircognizance. Claircognizance, of course, being the knowing, and then clairsentience being the feeling, clairaudience being like clairvoyance, except it's through hearing. So as I grew up, I was mostly clairvoyant and claircognizant. I would just know things, who you could trust, who was going to break up, what was going to happen before it happened. And so grew up that way. But growing up in the suburbs of Kansas City, I quickly learned that that was weird. And so I didn't express it fully. I just kind of kept it to myself. But then as I got older, I found that, this is actually a desirable quality, but now I didn't know to do anything with it. I didn't know what to do or how to develop it and make it better. But then I went through, I guess, a dark night of the soul. My husband decided he wanted to leave the family, and it was a devastating blow. And I started searching, looking for soulmates and karma and life path and soul family and these type of things. I wound up with Dolores Cannon. All roads pointed toward Dolores Cannon, which I'll talk about in a bit. But Dolores Cannon, of course, was a very well-known metaphysician and was doing this type of hypnosis technique called quantum healing hypnosis technique. And I found out about that to learn about past lives, to learn about path, to learn about soul family, all in karma, all of these things. And I said, oh, that's what I need to do. I need to do this session, this hypnosis with Dolores, and then I can answer all my, get all my questions answered. Well, I called her office and I asked for an appointment with her, and she was booked up for 4 years. And her staff was wonderful. They said, well, she's just started teaching her methods. So you might be able to find someone who has trained with her near you, which I did. And my husband and I both went to see this gentleman. He was the head of the Psychical Studies Institute here in Kansas City. And neither one of us could get very far with this. And so he was actually a psychologist. And Dr. Jones, he said, well, this doesn't happen very often, but if it does, then I refer people to someone who can tell you about your karma, tell you about your life path, tell you about soulmates. And he referred me to a psychic, and she's here in the Kansas City area. And I had a wonderful reading with her. I sent many of my friends to her, and they also had wonderful readings. And she started teaching classes, and I started taking her classes and learned that I was actually pretty good at what I was experiencing and what I was doing, and learned how to channel it, learned how to work with it and develop it. And so I started working with clients probably around 2010, 2011, maybe. Started working with clients. And at that time, it was still mostly the clairvoyance and claircognizance. I had a client, and I was working out of my house at the time. I had a client come to my house for a reading, which, all my clients did. And he had a great reading. It was very informative. He really enjoyed it. He wanted to bring his family back. And I said, that's great. Let's schedule you for a couple of weeks out. He came back with his family, but a few days before that, Victor, it was the strangest thing. I was fearful. I thought, what am I doing asking these people into my home? They're going to beat me. They're going to abuse me. This is just madness. I almost canceled. And I thought, no. This gentleman, this young man was very nice. He was very sweet. And it sounded like his family was wonderful as well. I'm sure it's going to be okay. I'm not sure what's going on. But they showed up to my house. And the first thing I said, this is going to sound crazy. Is there a history of domestic violence and domestic abuse and maybe even sexual abuse in the family? And the father said, yeah, that's my dad. And immediately the feeling left me. So that was my first introduction to clairsentience, which I've been working with ever since. So, we can have these gifts and then they can develop and change and shift and new gifts come in. So that was my experience. After working with people for maybe a couple of years, I started meeting folks in this realm, the metaphysical realm. And I was meeting so many people who were doing energy work and Reiki, and I had no idea what any of that was. I had no idea about energy work. Reiki was a completely unknown concept to me. And the more I learned about it, Spirit just said, this is what you need to do. You need to study this stuff. You need to start practicing it. I was actually doing readings in a integrative, holistic, metaphysical center. And there was a teacher there who was teaching Reiki, and I took Reiki. I took Reiki 1, 2, 3, and then Master. Actually, no, my first teacher was outside of the center, but this teacher at the center encouraged me, and then I did my Master with her, and so then I added Reiki to what I was practicing.
We have a lot in common, including childhood experiences. I'll tell you one of mine quickly. I would report things that I would see, hear, or feel to my parents, and I was told that I had an overactive imagination. Yeah. I was very close to my paternal grandfather, and one day when I was around 6.5 years old, I'm sitting in my room looking at a book, and I look up, and my grandfather's standing there. I said, Grandpa, when did you come in? And he didn't say a word, just smiled at me and sort of disappeared. And I went into the living room and I said to my parents, Grandpa was just here. And they looked at me, they looked at each other, and they both knew, which I was not aware of, that my grandfather was in the hospital at the time. And within a couple of minutes, the phone rang with word of my grandfather's passing. And so from that point forward, it wasn't about having an overactive imagination, but they kept their eyes on me and they told me not to share anything with anyone else other than them if I had any other experiences. So I sort of had that similar experience as a child. And then the other thing, Reiki became a major factor in my life in my late 30s. I had a number of events which led me to Reiki, and Reiki became life-changing for me, including leading me to interfaith ministry later on. Because in those days, if you wanted to go into a hospital and do laying on of hands, you either had to be a licensed massage therapist or ordained in a faith where laying on of hands was part of the sacraments. And so consequently, that's why I chose to pursue the interfaith ministry. And that changed my life in so many wonderful ways. But sharing all that experience with you, tell us a little bit about your Radiate Wellness community and what it offers.
So the Radiate Wellness community is a virtual wellness center. And I started it that way in 2016. I'd been laid off from my corporate job at Hallmark headquarters in 2015. And I knew that I didn't want to do another corporate job. It just, had a visceral reaction to working corporate again. So I decided I wanted to open another metaphysical wellness center like the one that I started in. But I knew that I didn't have the capital for a physical location. So I started it as a virtual practice. And this is a group practice. The website is radiatewellnesscommunity.com. And that's basically our office. So you can go to radiatewellnesscommunity.com and find out about our practitioners, our practices. You can schedule an appointment. You can check out our blog and the podcasts all on that website and our shop tab. And so you can do everything that you would in an office there. And so we are 4 practitioners. There's myself, and I do basically readings, Reiki, and regression, which is an easy way to remember it. And then there's Jen Watts, who is our embodiment coach. She does transformational embodiment coaching, primarily for women going through perimenopause and menopause and trying to figure out your life after the young womanhood and how to move into the next chapter. And then there's Heather Cotton, who is an energy worker as well. She does another type of Reiki that she calls body wisdom. And she's an excellent, excellent healer. She's here in the Kansas City area as well. And then there's Mary Jane Stodenman, who is our resident astrologer and tarot person. And she lives in Geneva, Switzerland. So she sees people either there in Switzerland or online. And then Heather, Jen, and we can all see people in person or online as well.
Tell us a little bit more about the quantum healing hypnosis technique.
Oh, it is something else. So it was developed by Dolores Cannon back in probably the early 70s, maybe mid 70s. And quantum healing hypnosis technique is hypnosis, but it's more of a metaphysical bent to it. I also do clinical hypnosis, which is the weight loss and the smoking cessation and anxieties and phobias and habit correction, that type of thing. But QHHT, as we call it, is the big kahuna. It can take us to other lifetimes, and those could be what we would consider past, what we might consider as future. It can take us to between lives when we need to see that. It can take us to the current life if there's something that we need to see from earlier in the current life. It can take us to concurrent lives, which gets a little strange, living more than one current life or what we would consider contemporary lifetime. And sometimes it just takes us to other dimensions where we can receive healing. But then it also puts us in touch with our higher self. We call it the subconscious in QHHT. That's what Dolores called it. It's not necessarily the strict psychological way that we would see the subconscious. It's more our higher self, the consciousness that is behind our waking consciousness. And when we speak to our higher consciousness, we can ask all types of questions. What was this chapter of my life about? What was the meaning behind it? What do I need to know about certain relationships? What are my next steps in my career or in my life? can I receive healing for various maladies and dysfunctions in the body? And it's amazing what we can achieve with the higher self in terms of healing. The body is very intelligent and really can heal itself, but we need to get out of its way and we need to allow it. And when we're working with the higher self, they will say, yeah, there's a lesson behind this situation. There's a lesson behind this. And, the client has gotten the lesson out of it, or this is what the client needs to know in order to have this healed, and then they can resolve it. I don't like to usually say that it's healed during a session, but I do tend to refer to it as it's resolved or it's no longer a problem. And I've seen all kinds of things be resolved. People walk in with a limp, they walk out and they don't have a limp. They walk in and they've got a rash all over their face, and they walk out and they don't have a rash all over their face. So I see these things actively dealt with in sessions. It's quite amazing.
And how does this relate to Akashic record readings?
That's an excellent question. The Akashic records are literally an etheric hall of records, and it's our records, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, thoughts, words, and deeds that we've experienced, and how it has to do with the current lifetime, which is the most important one that we could examine, because that's where our point of reference is. That's where our point of action is in the present. But we would want to know about other lifetimes just in terms of, what do I need to know now, right? How does this affect me now? So the Akashic Records is basically, it's a history book of our soul. And I'll see sometimes clients will go to the Akashic Records. They describe it in various terms, but kind of similar as well. Now, when I do Akashic Records work, I see it as a type of a Parthenon type of structure. And there will be loved ones and guides and elders and masters lined up in front of it, welcoming the client, welcoming me, and showing me what I need to know, pulling from that large Parthenon type of building that has stacks and stacks and stacks of books. And I will have clients go to the records. Very interestingly enough, they'll describe it in terms of, it's a vast library, huge. There's just all of these filing cabinets. There's all of these books. And then if we're lucky, we'll find one of the masters of the records who will show us around. But we always find information there, always.
Prior to your soon-to-be-published new book, Real Life Angel Encounters, you were co-author of the best-selling book, The Gap: Simple Steps to Reclaim Your Health and Reverse Most Chronic Diseases. What inspired that book, and what do you share with readers?
Yes. So that book is a collaborative effort. There is myself who wrote a chapter, but then doctors of chiropractic, herbalists, psychologists, all types of people in their fields would write from their perspective about simple things that we can do to reclaim our health. My particular chapter was about energy in the body, which is the foundation of so much that I do, because emotion is energy. Energy comprises our body. Our body is very little physical matter. In fact, atoms have very, very little physical matter. It's all energy, and that's true of our bodies as well. So when we hold emotions in our bodies, when we hold trauma in our bodies and we don't move it along, then it can develop into dis-ease. We can even receive injuries and accidents that correspond to where we're holding our trauma and holding that energy in our bodies. So we'll find things that are very symbolic, such as, our shoulders. If we have problems with our shoulders, it's because we're taking on too much responsibility, carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. And so, I'll ask somebody who's having shoulder problems, I can see if it's the right or the left, and I'll ask them, because I know that each side of the body has to do with our feminine people in our lives or our masculine people in our lives, has to do with, excuse me, the way we go about things, what we take on, how we choose to express. And so I can see what's going on with them. So I'll start to decode it with them. Okay, so what's going on? You've got some left shoulder problems. Are you dealing with things from your mom? Are you taking on power of attorney or dealing with some of her papers? Are you having to take her to the doctor a lot and having to deal with responsibility related to your mother or an important woman in your life? So helping clients to unlock that and undecode it, I should say. And then in my Reiki practice, I work directly on those energy blocks in various ways. I've got a bunch of different tips and tricks and things like that to work on energy in the body. So that chapter in The Gap has to do with a simple map of the body and what we tend to hold where. And then also it walks us through the chakra center, the chakra system, which are the chakras are just energy centers within the body. Each one corresponds to different emotions, beliefs, and attitudes, as well as physical function within the body. So for example, the root chakra occurs at the base of the spine and has to do with our hips, our external genitalia, has to do with the rectum and different things of the physical body, but it also has to do with it's our root chakra, so it has to do with our roots, our foundation. So early attitudes toward, do I have safety? Do I have trusted people with me? Are my needs met? And if, as an adult, later on, we're feeling insecure in our job, in our home, in our relationship, that might show up in the root chakra. So that my chapter also highlights the chakra system and how our energy affects that. And then I show a model that I like to use for dealing with physical disease and injury. So I see this physical disease and injury as the model of a mountain that we're trying to dig tunnels through. Now, I spent some time in Switzerland. I'm actually a Swiss citizen as well. And there's lots of tunnels going through the mountains there. So I'm very familiar with this model. And so if we're trying to dig a tunnel through this mountain, on one side, we're going to start digging through using all of the physical things, physical therapy and drugs and treatments, maybe even surgery if it's warranted. We want to address the physical thing because we have physical bodies and it just makes sense. But then on the other side of the mountain, what we want to work on is the factors that led to this disease in the body in the first place. Issues with our parents, issues growing up, trauma that we've not dealt with. We want to work on that because that's what created the situation. And what we want to do is we want to meet in the middle. And when we meet in the middle, then we achieve lasting healing. Of course, QHHT can get us there much faster, but there's other things that can help us, like getting regular massage for the physical plus Reiki for the energetic. Doing those regularly, that can help us a lot. Psychotherapy, that can help us a lot to unpack if we're with the right therapist who helps us understand and put our trauma in its proper place. So I always want to work in tandem and work in conjunction with the physical and the metaphysical, because if we're only looking at the physical side of it, we can achieve some relief, but it might not be lasting because we're still creating the situation as we go. However, if we only look at the metaphysical, the energetic, the emotional, and the trauma work, we're going to get there as well. But it could take us just as long to untangle the situation as it did to create the situation. So I really like this tandem approach, and I always consider myself something of a practical mystic. And if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My guest is Christi Clemons Hoffman. We're going to be talking about her new book, Real Life Angel Encounters, when we come back. Christi, please share with our listeners where they can get your books and find out more about you and your wonderful work.
Thank you, Victor. The book will be out in all places July 1st. It comes out a little bit earlier, maybe a week and a half earlier in the UK, but in the US, it will be available July 1st. But you can pre-order right now. In fact, pre-orders help a lot because it boosts the book in the algorithms, and that's a huge thing. So the pre-order link is available on my website, The website is radiatewellnesscommunity.com/shop. Scroll down to the Real Life Angel Encounters link, and then that will take you to the pre-order links. So pre-order the book now, right now, and it'll be hot in your hands as soon as it comes off the presses and is available for everyone to purchase. It'll be in your mailbox early.
We'll be back with more of Christi after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
The cutting edge of conscious radio, Om Times Radio, IOM FM. Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week, Christi Clemons Hoffman, her new book, Real Life Angel Encounters.
Real Life Angel Encounters is a book that I created after my podcast of the same name, Real Life Angel Encounters. This podcast can be found anywhere you would find podcasts, including YouTube. And Real Life Angel Encounters was born out of the pandemic, actually. You know, everyone was turning to YouTube and metaphysical books. They were studying things that they'd always maybe were interested in, but never had time to do. And so all of these people were going through what I call a post-COVID awakening. And in this post-COVID awakening, there was a demand for things that were positive and uplifting. Around this time, this was 2021, mind you, so we were, past the biggest part of the pandemic of 2020, but we were still dealing with it. And my guides started tapping me on the shoulder and saying, you need to tell people about us. You need to tell our story. And I said, well, that's awesome. I had done a series on YouTube called 52 Weeks of Angel Connection, in which I tuned into a different archangel or ascended master every week for a year, because my guides told me you need to learn how to do YouTube. And so that was my project that they gave me, was to do this 52 weeks of angel connection. So when my guides tapped me on the shoulder in 2021, I said, okay, I've already done a series on you guys. What else do you want me to do? They said, you need to start another podcast. And I said, no, I've already got a podcast and I'm very busy with that. And I don't really want to do another one. They said, okay, that's fine. That's fine. And let me go on for a while. And they tapped me again. They said, okay, seriously, we need to talk about this podcast thing. And I said, I'm a single mom and I've got a busy practice and I don't have time to do another podcast. And they said, okay, that's all right. Third time they tapped me and they said, okay, do it. Seriously, do it now. And so I finally started the work to get this together. I did some opinion polling. I came up with the name Real Life Angel Encounters. And I said, well, how is this going to work? And I looked to Jim Harold, who is considered the OG of paranormal. He's got the Paranormal Podcast. He's got a bunch of other podcasts as well. The Cryptid Report, The Other Side. He's got a true crime podcast. I mean, some of these were fairly short-lived, but he's done all of this podcasting. But what really caught my attention was his campfire, Jim Harold's campfire. And it was real people calling in, telling ghost stories. And I love this podcast. I really love this show. And it seemed like a pretty good model. Have real people tell their real encounters. And come to find out, so many people have them. In fact, before we started recording, you told me you had one as well, Victor. I can't wait to hear it. So all of these people have stories of synchronicities, of loved ones. And might I say, it's not all strictly angels like what we would think of. They're not showing up with halos and wings, although sometimes they do. But there's also stories of near-death experiences and the beings that we meet on the other side, or the abilities that we come back with after a near-death experience. It's also about dreams, prophetic dreams, and dreams of loved ones. It's about synchronicities and events that just seem to happen out of the blue and no explanation. And even aliens. I've got a great story. It's not in the book. It didn't make it to the book, but it was on the podcast about alien visits. So anything that's uplifting, that's positive, I like to say that it's for people who love the positivity with the paranormal and like spirits with their actual spirituality. So it's anything that is strange, unusual, uplifting, but positive, right? Loving, kind. There's the story of the Cokeville miracle as in the podcast as well as the book. And then the Joplin, the butterfly people of Joplin after the tornado that devastated that town. So yes, the podcast went on originally in the first series, 40 episodes. Bear in mind, I was doing that weekly. And I was doing my other podcast, the Radiate Wellness Podcast, which we'll talk about, I'm sure. I was doing that one weekly. So 2 weekly podcasts plus a busy group practice and single mom. I was driving myself crazy. Plus, it was getting harder and harder to find people who would willingly tell me their stories. So I was meeting many people who said, oh yeah, I've got a great story. My great aunt Sally. And I'd say, okay, well, when do you want to record it? And then crickets. It seemed like there were very few people who wanted to actually share their stories. And I was having to scramble each and every week to find stories to tell. And then I looked to the news, which was great because there are some super stories out there of miraculous things. Like I mentioned, the Cokeville miracle, Joplin, the butterfly people, the Loretto staircase. There are stories out there, but I just was having a hard time sourcing everything and scrounging and scrambling to get content together for this podcast. So after 40 episodes, I put it to bed. Well, guess what? The platform that hosts both of the podcasts, Real Life Angel Encounters and Radiate Wellness, these are both on the mindbodyspirit.fm network, the mindbodyspirit.fm network. And the network came to me and they said, what would you think about bringing back Real Life Angel Encounters? I said, I don't know about that. That was killing me. It was so hard to find stories, and that's 2 podcasts going on. And they said, well, it's still doing really, really well, even though you don't have new episodes coming out. You still gain new listeners all the time. And I know that I've got a Facebook group called Real Life Angel Encounters for people to share their stories and to connect with each other. And that was getting new participants every week. I was literally getting new people join that group every week. And so I thought, well, maybe there is some wisdom in bringing this back. But I thought, how am I going to do this? I just don't have the bandwidth for 2 full-time shows, 2 weekly shows. And then Spirit tapped me on the shoulder and said, duh, do them every other week. And so every Tuesday, there's a new podcast coming out. It could be Real Life Angel Encounters, and it could be Radiate Wellness. And that seems to be a very happy compromise.
Christi, why do some people have these experiences and others not?
I love that question, Victor. And I get asked that all the time. Well, I truly think that we all have these encounters, but we write them off. But the ones who, really believe that it's angels or think, oh, wow, this is more than just mere coincidence. I think those are people who are open to different phenomenon, who would be open to a loved one visit or an angel visit or a synchronicity that should not have happened, except that it was guided divinely somehow. So people being open to all of that, plus also people who have a more positive view, I think, who don't see the world in negative terms, that they see the world in terms of what good can happen to me today, what is possible. So I think those are 2 important factors. But yeah, again, I do think that these happen to us a lot and more than we think. But to recognize it for what it truly is, I think we need to be open to it and have a positive outlook toward it, right? So people who are fearful, who might think of a stranger coming to help them in their time of need, they might be fearful. It's like, what does a stranger want? rather than being open. Oh my gosh, you came at the exact right time. There's a story of this in my book. This woman is outside of Lawrence, Kansas, which if you know Lawrence, Kansas at all, it's a nice metropolitan city. It's not huge. It's a college town, but then lots of countryside all around it. The next biggest town is Kansas City. There's also Topeka, but Kansas City is really the biggest town outside of Lawrence. And she had a flat tire on a one-way bridge, foggy morning, no visibility. And she's like, if anybody comes around this corner, they're not going to see me in time. It's a one-car bridge. How is this going to work? And she didn't know how to change a tire. She called her parents. She called her friends. Nobody could come and help her right away. And then this gentleman shows up in a beat-up pickup truck, and he says, hey, you're in trouble here. Can I help? Now, someone who's fearful, who's distrustful, might say, no, I'm calling people. They're going to help me, and might be afraid of this man. But she wasn't. She said there was something about him. He was not, she describes him as not being attractive, which she later says, I know that was being kind of shallow of me. But she says, not somebody that I would necessarily think was angelic, but somehow he looked kind. And she accepted his help. He changed the tire, no problem. All he wanted in return was a hug. She gave him a hug and he went on his way. And she really feels like he was sent, but maybe not that he was an angel himself. He could have been, but that he was sent by someone because she needed that. Mm-hmm. And, someone who's fearful would not accept the help. Someone who was fearful would shy away from that type of thing. But she embraced it. She was like, I can accept the help and I can use that help. So I think that's the biggest difference. I think if we all think back over near misses or synchronous events, we could think of those in terms of, well, they could be miracles or they could be coincidence. I choose to think of them as they could be miracles. Why not?
There are no coincidences. I've experienced so many synchronicities in my life. I can absolutely say there are no coincidences.
There are no coincidences.
Everything happens for a reason.
I believe so. And, if we choose to look at these things as miraculous encounters, synchronicities, if we think of them as, a visit from a loved one or a visit from an angel, instead of just wishful thinking, because a lot of people can write it off as, oh, I was just thinking of grandma and here I'm smelling her perfume. And they think of it just as their imagination, like what you were told when you were a child. Oh, you've just got an active imagination. But why not believe? I always tell my clients and my students that if it's uplifting, if it's an uplifting encounter, if it's helpful and maybe even answers some questions for you, then why not count it as miraculous? Why not count it as an intervention, right? Why rule that out? Why not look at the wonder and the awe that's all around us naturally?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Why is the subject of angels so important right now?
Oh my gosh, we need angels. We need them so much. There are people who are just feeling hopeless, who are feeling helpless, who are feeling anxious about the future. There's so much to be anxious about, not just here in the States, but around the world. Worried about putting food on your table, worried about what if I get sick and I don't have my Medicare. There's just so much to be anxious about. Oh my gosh, the solar flares and the Schumann resonance and the eclipses and the energy has been really bad. And measles outbreak. In Kansas, we've got a tuberculosis outbreak. I mean, there's so much to be fearful of, and we need some hope. We need to know we're not alone. In fact, I open the book by saying I am on a quest for world domination, to let everybody know that we're not alone. We've got guides and helpers around us all the time. We don't have to do this by ourselves. And then B, that we're so much more than we think we are. There's a whole world out there that we're connected to, whether we realize it or not. And that's why I think we need to know this, dare I say, gospel. Gospel just means good news. We need to know this gospel that we're not alone, and there's so much more to us than we think there is.
Quick story I'll share with you. When I was in my first Reiki class in my late 30s, the Reiki Master teacher of the class gave us an exercise to do. They said, put your hands over your heart, close your eyes, and see what comes up for you. And immediately when he said that, I closed my eyes and I saw the image of what I perceived to be an angel. Now, I did not have angel consciousness prior to this point. And he came around the room and said, tell us what you see. And I said, I see an angel. He said, ask the angel its name. And immediately I heard Gabriel. I had no reason to think about Archangel Gabriel, but I heard Gabriel. That night I went home. My daughter was 13 at the time. And she said, Daddy, can you show me this Reiki stuff that you're doing? And I said, sure. She sat in the chair. I placed my palms above the back of her head. And immediately she said, Daddy, I see a group of our family who have passed away, a grandpa and others. And then she started naming people who had actually passed before she was born. And she said, there's an angel flying over them. I said, ask the angel its name. And she said, Gabriel. So she confirmed for me that Archangel Gabriel is related to our family, is somehow an angel that looks over our family. And I was so touched by that.
It's a beautiful story, Victor. You'll have to come on Real Life Angel Encounters and tell that story.
So are there personal guardian angels that everybody has?
Absolutely. People have a guardian angel that's with us from birth to death. These guardian angels they're contracted to us. There's a beautiful story of a guardian angel in the book, Real Life Angel Encounters, that came out of a QHHT session. This woman actually had a lifetime where she was this boy's guardian angel. Oh, it was a beautiful story. So you got to read the book. So anyway, yeah, we do have a guardian angel with us from birth to death. We have an archangel that's with us from birth to death as well. So these archangels have different jobs that they do. I think there are 15. Now, different people will tell you different numbers, but I see 15 archangels. And Gabriel, I call her Gabrielle, but Gabrielle has the job of helping us with communication. So
a messenger,
absolutely. Right? She delivered news to Elizabeth in the Bible and Mary in the Bible. She helps us know when we're going to have a baby. She helps people who are trying to adopt. She's my daughter's guardian angel. My daughter was adopted. And I mean, she's not my daughter's guardian angel. She's my daughter's archangel. But yeah, so she helps with communication and messages and delivering that. So no wonder that she's with your family. And then so those are the two that come in with us when we're born. So our archangels with us birth to death, and then our guardian angels with us birth to death. But then we can have others come and go as we need. We'll have loved ones. Doesn't matter if we ever met them or not. Doesn't matter if they died long before we were born. We can have any ancestor on our spiritual team. Then we have Ascended Masters also who can come and go. Ascended Masters are a mixed bag. Some of them have been human before, like Jesus and Yogananda. Some of them are deities, not minor deities. They are quick to tell me that. But some deities like Apollo and Lu and Pele. But they are all in service to humanity, and they have different things that they do according to what their mission was, either as a deity or as a person. And they can be with us as well. And then other just angels and other guides, like the old commercial set used to say, there's an app for that. There's a guide for that. And we can call in any guides that we want. If you're working on a new book, you can ask for, like, I need a writing guide to help me with this. We can call on Gabriel, right? We can also call on Tot, who was the Egyptian ibis-headed god who taught writing, or who brought writing to humanity. We can, if we're going to make a meal, we can call on Julia Child to help us make a meal. So we
Absolutely.
can ask for this help, and there's just an unending stream of assistance that's there for us.
My guest, Christi Clemons Hoffman, her new book, Real Life Angel Encounters, Real People Share Real Stories of Miraculous Encounters. We'll be back with more after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week, Christi Clemons Hoffman, her new book, Real Life Angel Encounters. Christi, I had a dream several months ago that was so lucid and so vivid, and the message had me awaken in tears. And the dream was I was attending an angel academy. And there was this huge temple, and there were 18 tables around in a U shape in the inside of the temple. And we were instructed to go from table to table, make eye contact with the angel at each table, and when they nodded their heads, to move on to the next and complete the cycle of all 18 tables. And afterwards, we were instructed to go to the front main table where we would receive our angelic name and our assignment. And the name that I was given was Aviel, which in Hebrew means God is my Father. And my assignment was to be an angel to other angels. And I recognized when I woke up that I've been doing that for years. I'm not talking about angels in the angelic sense, but people, human angels. I've been helping others for years and years and years. And I was so touched to receive that message.
It's a beautiful dream, Victor. That's amazing. Wow. And I don't doubt it at all. You know, when we have these dreams that seem more real than real,
Yeah.
we can take it to the bank that has been a visit, that you actually were there. Because, you know, when we're asleep, it's the body that needs rest. That's when our body heals and repairs itself. But our consciousness gets bored, and we're free to travel around and go visiting. We'll have loved ones visit as well that seem more real than real. And I've had, you know, at least one of those. But what an amazing experience. And honestly, it reminds me a lot of the guardian angel I talked about that's in the book. You know, she talked about going back to where she was trained. And, you know, I was fascinated with that. She described the place of learning and her teachers and her main teacher, and then how she learned to do her job, basically. Oh, that is beautiful. I don't doubt it at all.
Now, does one have to be religious to believe in angels?
Oh, goodness, no. I know that's a common misconception, isn't it? But no, one does not need to be religious. In fact, the angels are in all walks of life, various religions. In fact, I address that in the book, as a matter of fact. There's a couple of chapters just about angels and guides and who they are, how we work with them. But yeah, all of the major religions do have their angels. Also, you know, the indigenous religions as well. They've got their deities, but then they also have other beings who are not quite deities, but who are helpful to them. So no, we don't have to be religious. It's like, do we have to be a scientist to believe in gravity? No, it's going to affect us anyway.
Absolutely, yeah. You know, it's interesting. You mentioned that in Buddhism, they have what's known as the Bodhisattva, which is a being that had displaced all their karma and was given the opportunity to move on to nirvana, and had so much love for humanity that they vow to stay within the human realm and dry the tear on every face.
Yes. It's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Yeah. And I see our guides that way. Absolutely. And bodhisattvas, that they assist humanity. And that is true of the archangels. There's a hierarchy of angels, and, you know, the hierarchy basically goes from the 5th dimension up to the 12th dimension. And we would think that archangels are the highest form of angels, but they're not. That is reserved for the seraphim and the cherubim. But archangels are mid-level angels, and they are mid-level angels because they work with humanity. They work with humans, solve our
Absolutely.
problems.
Do you communicate with angels during your healing practices?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So when I do Reiki, I call it medical intuitive Reiki with healing guides because I am a medical intuitive and then I bring in guides. Archangel Shamuel is 90% of the time with me in Reiki sessions. But then ancestors will come in and other guides, other archangels, other ascended masters will come in to the Reiki sessions, and clients will say, I know you were at my feet, but man, I felt somebody's hands on my arm. And, it's like, oh, that's the right arm. Yep. I know they were there. They help all the time. And then of course I do readings for people, and the guides always show up for that as well.
We had talked about synchronicities earlier, that Carl Jung coined the term synchronicity as a meaningful coincidence without causal connection. And I've had several of these throughout my life, literally almost every year or a couple of times a year, I've had a major synchronicity. In 1975, I was in the United States Air Force and I was stationed in Seoul, Korea. And I would write to my mother back in New York every month, and she would write back. And I had no reason to think anything was wrong. And then one morning I woke up and the voice told me, you got to call your mother in New York. She needs to hear from you. And whenever that voice would show up for me, I would always respond to it. And I called my mother back in New York. And back in those days, for those of us old enough to remember, we had things called extension phones, which were wired telephones that you could pick up one phone in one room and the same phone in another room. And my sister and my mother answered the phone simultaneously. And I said, Mom, is there anything wrong? And my sister exclaims, oh my God, how did he find out? She was scheduled for major surgery the next day. And the voice told me to tell her that the surgery would be a complete success. She'd have a full recovery. She had nothing to worry about. She needed to hear those words. And I'm forever grateful for that message, that communication, that synchronicity.
That's amazing. You see, people have those type of things happen and they might write it off, right? So why not just act on it? And if it's something that's helpful and useful, awesome. If it's just, it was nice to talk to your mom, that's great too, right? Why not act on it?
Absolutely. So many of our listeners are thinking, how can they open themselves to having an angelic or miraculous encounter?
First of all, know that you don't have to be special. You don't have to be Joan of Arc to be visited by an angel. It's for everyone, for everyone. And then, so being open, but also believe that it can happen. And then third of all, I would say our guides and our angels, and I use these terms interchangeably, Victor, because they're all these angelic beings that are around us. They want to help us. They are here for us. They're for our benefit. They earn their wings, if I may borrow a phrase from It's a Wonderful Life. They earn their wings by helping us. And they can move up in the ranks by helping us. This is especially true of our loved ones and, the random guides who come around and help us. They need to help us. They want to help us, and we need to let them. But we do also need to ask them. They're not going to come in and swoop in and just save the day. They can, but they usually don't. The only exception would be if it was not our time to die and they need to come in and do something, which we hear stories of that all the time. But we have to ask. And so it's just as simple as talking out loud or in your mind, just saying, hey, guys, my team, I need some help here. I need to make a difficult call and I don't know what to say. Please help me to know that. I'm going out to a dangerous part of town. I need to run an errand. Please keep me safe. I'm having problems with my car. Please make my car at least function until I get to the repair shop. We can ask for all kinds of things. And then the trick is to set it and forget it. So we ask for help and then we release it. We know that the help is coming and know that it can come in a variety of ways. Yes, an angel could just show up and save the day, or there could be a person showing up on a foggy road outside of town in a beat up truck and come and change your tire.
Absolutely. And what we're doing is setting the intention and then being open to receiving.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What would you like readers to take away from real-life angel encounters?
That this is something that can happen to any one of us. That when we look back over these events in our lives, that we just kind of scratch our head and say, that was really cool. What if it was an angel encounter? I want people to come away with hope that we're surrounded at all times by loving beings who want to help us, and that we're never alone. That's really my most fervent wish, that people would take away from real life angel encounters. Real people share real stories of miraculous encounters.
The wisdom of Christi Clemons Hoffman. Christi, please share with the listeners one more time where they can get your books and find out more about you and your amazing work.
Thank you, Victor. The book will be out in all places July 1st. It comes out a little bit earlier, maybe a week and a half earlier in the UK, but in the US, it will be available July 1st. But you can pre-order right now. In fact, pre-orders help a lot because it boosts the book in the algorithms, and that's a huge thing. So the pre-order link is available on my website. The website is radiatewellnesscommunity.com/shop. Scroll down to the Real Life Angel Encounters link, and then that will take you to the pre-order links. So pre-order the book now, right now, and it'll be hot in your hands as soon as it comes off the presses and is available for everyone to purchase. It'll be in your mailbox early.
And the podcasts and all of the wonderful services that your organization offers are also on that website.
Yes, radiatewellnesscommunity.com.
Christi, thank you so much for joining us and sharing this amazing and wonderful wisdom and words that people need to hear today.
Thank you, Victor. I appreciate it.
And thank you for joining us on Destination Unlimited. I'm Victor, the Voice Furman. Have a wonderful week.